Matt, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome, awesome. I think I'm gonna say let's go ahead and kick this off. If you kind of want to just start it off and introduce yourself and some of the panelists here, and then we'll jump into the substance here. So, guys, I'm gonna let Matt McCormick take it away here.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to another webinar session from Imaging Spectrum. If you don't know me, I'm Matt McCormick. I head of the inkjet team here at Imaging Spectrum. I got Zach Jones, who will be leading this whole section here. He's my main technical guy on everything that we do. And I got Morgan Lynn here, who's our Epson rep, who say, hey, Morgan, how's it going?
Hey, Matt, how are you?
All right. He attends to about every one of our webinars and gives us really good insight on things, on that on that side of things. So real good to have you here as well. So really today we're going over maybe a topic that's, that y'all know about, but then there's a lot, it's a kind of a vast topic all over the place. And with so much information that needs to be done as far as getting graphics right on different types of printers and going through different operating systems and software programs to get it done. So it's a very, like I say, very just big topic that can cover a lot of things. So we're going to go over some, Zach's going to go over some specifics on trying to get settings right as far as your prints go on different printers and different programs like Photoshop and some other ones, and hopefully get you some real good information on that. We do have, feel free, during the thing you can send a question, but we're going to reserve some questions at the end so we can answer as they come in. We sure appreciate that. So hopefully y'all learned something, and if there's anything on the side after this you need to call us, just call us at 214-342-9290, and we can address those as well. So Zach, take it away.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you, Matt. And Matt is absolutely right. We're going to really just kind of scratch the surface a bit today on a few of these. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of these topics we could really break down and almost make individual webinars for each one. But for this first graphics matter, kind of our part one of our series we're working on here, I just want to give you a very general overview, just so you can maybe hear some terms for the first time, maybe come up with some definitions that you might not have heard before. So I say let's just jump right in, and let's kind of see what's going on here. So first, I want to kind of give you guys a basic overview, printer options, which I'm sure most of you guys know about out there. But, one thing about these graphics is we always want to create our graphic for that final output. So if that final output's a 5x7, or if that final output's going to be a 64 by 100-inch print or something of that nature. So we need to kind of just be aware. And then, if you're not certain, it never hurts to start larger and work our way down. We're going to talk about a few basics when it comes to setting up your document, what file types to start with, what sizing to work with, what PPI, what pixel count. So, and then that's going to kind of transition into the resolution side of things. That way we're going to get the optimum output from our unit there. And then of course, we always like to throw a demonstration. I got a video or two I want to show you some basics, and then we're going to open it up for everybody. So let's dive in. I'm sure you guys have all heard this term before, but I do just want to kind of, as you see, I have it in big, bold letters, as you guys have probably seen, garbage in is garbage out. So, unfortunately, it's, starting with a less than stellar file means that we're only kind of fighting an uphill battle there. So we always want to start with the highest quality file we can. And I'm going to talk to you guys too today about different file types. You might have heard before, like JPEG, some degrade over time. So working in a JPEG, constantly saving that versus working in something like a PSD file, which is lossless. So we're going to go over all that stuff, but I just wanted this to kind of sink in that, dealing with a problem file means we're only going to be dealing with problems the rest of the way through. So first, I want to talk about the printer options. I know here we're mostly going to be talking about the Epson, the wide format side of things, but this applies to no matter what you're working with. The reason I bring these up is because of two reasons. One, we need to know what we're working with, like a P-series, what profile are we going to work for? Are we printing to canvas? Are we printing to a luster paper? And also we need to know what size we're working with. So as you can see, these P-series can range from 13 all the way to 64 inches. The S series, if you're working with an eco solvent, is always going to be in that 64-inch range. So we want to make sure that we have enough information to send to these units. So that way, when we do go to print, whether we need to do a 13, or maybe we might need to do both a 13 and a 64-inch print, we want to be prepared for that. And then same with the F series and the T series. We work all the way from 24 to 64. I don't know if some of you out there might have had your hands on some of those new F570s that are very, very popular right now. And so working with a 24-inch form factor does open up a lot of opportunities for us for goods. So I do want to kind of talk about prepping your graphic again so that we have the versatility. And just let you know, that is the width of all these printers. So yes, so it's going to be 13 inches all the way up to a 64-inch printer, and everything in between. What I have over here on the right side, if you can see this picture, is the 9570. So this is the new flagship wide format printer from Epson. It is a beast, I will definitely say that. Speed is significant. And one thing I just like to talk about on this one, because I know some people, especially in production environments, they did do the matte black switching. So no longer do we have to drain that line and worry about if we're doing matte or photo black. But we can save that for another topic. I do just want to kind of reiterate, it's more based on this size here that we're working with. So I just want to show you guys a couple things here. We got the S series. This is the S4600, 64-inch wide, CMYK. They also have an 8600 with a wider gamut. We also have the 570, which is probably our most popular printer right now. So I know some people are getting are new into the industry, or maybe they're jumping into sublimation for the first time. And they're having a hard time when it comes to maybe templates or resizing their image for, who knows, masks or Chromelex panels. So we're going to go over all that stuff today as well. So first off, let's just start with some basic terms. I know for some of you out there, this is probably old hat. You've heard it many times, but for those of you who are new, I just want to reiterate this. So first off, let's start with vector versus raster. You guys might have heard these terms thrown around before. The best way I'll describe them is vector is more of a math-based, where raster is going to be the pixel-based that we're used to, kind of with a like a camera, which you get out of there. So with a vector, the nice thing is we can size it up to any size we need to. I don't care if you're going to do a 100-foot print. We're going to keep that resolution and that detail in there. The thing about it is, since it is vector and math-based, if we have any of those natural gradients that you might see or that the human eye is used to, it does make that more difficult, whereas the raster side of things, which is more like the photograph that we will work with, are going to be what we're dealing with on a more regular basis. So another thing I want to throw out there is DPI versus PPI. I hear this used interchangeably a lot. I just want to kind of give you guys the tools to know the difference if you do hear those terms. So we have dots per inch and pixels per inch. So the way I can describe it is dots per inch is going to be our physical. So it's going to be what actually comes out of the printer here and gets laid down on the media. Whereas PPI, the pixels per inch, is going to be based off of our screen. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that later, but just to kind of throw some numbers at you there real quick, 300 PPI when we're working in an RGB is going to be equivalent to closer to a 1200 DPI for the CMYK. And again, you can imagine we're working with different types, what they call subtractive versus additive. And so with the DPI, we're starting with a white base, and we're laying down colors over top of that. Whereas with the PPI, we're starting with nothing, and we're adding light, so we're adding those colors to it. File types, just real briefly, we deal with a lot here depending on the machine you're using. So if you're going to do something that you're going to send out to print maybe, or if something that you're going to be working with in-house, if you need a transparency, if you just need a quick low-res file, there's a lot of different things to work with there, JPEGs, PNGs, TIFFs, PDFs, PSDs. So I just want to throw those terms out there, and we will dive into those lately. And those directly correlate to the transparency and size as well. And hopefully you guys can see down here, we're going to release this for everyone after all said and done here. And we did include some links directly to some of the Adobe file formats and their help site there. So if you have any kind of further questions, you can obviously call us, but this will give you more tools to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that as well. So let's jump into file types. I don't know, hopefully this is not new to you, but you guys might have seen this kind of transparent background before, and 9 times out of 10 that signals transparency. I will say I have seen some folks maybe grab some images from online where they think this might be a transparency, but actually turns out to be baked into the graphic as a JPEG. So just something to be aware of. But in general, when working in any of these programs, especially like a Photoshop, this will basically denote a transparency, which means that when we export our file, anything that this checkerboard is touching will just be non-existent. So especially if we're doing something for maybe a direct-to-garment print, or if we're doing something where we need a transparency for our sublimation, that's always a good tool to have. And we'll do some more diving into the actual Photoshop side here shortly, but I just wanted you guys to have this visual in your head here. And then I do throw PSD in here. I'm just going to briefly touch on that. Like I said, we're going to do more of a deep dive into Photoshop shortly. A PSD, and I recommend this. So a prime example, let's just say a client sends you a JPEG. Maybe it was a cell phone picture, who knows? So we don't want to continue working with that JPEG because, again, like I was mentioning earlier, it will degrade over time. So the more we edit it, the more times we save it and export it, the more we're going to degrade that image. So I would immediately say if you're working with a JPEG, bring it into Photoshop, and we're going to save it as a PSD there. A PSD is more of a lossless file, so that's going to give us the ability to really stretch those colors, edit to our heart's content without worrying about degrading that image there. And then last, I'm going to show you guys some templates here shortly. A very exciting thing that I know a lot of you can take advantage of, especially in the sublimation world. You know, there's all kinds of goods out there. We're not just printing onto, you know, a 24 by 36 sheet at this point. It might be an 8.5 by 3.5. It might be a mug. It might be a Chromolux panel. You know, it could be a mask these days, where we definitely need to make sure all of our margins stay within those lines there. So I'm going to show you guys how to work with the template in Photoshop. Again, a lot of this will translate to some of the other programs out there. So I do want to show you a few cheaper options if you guys are starting to get into it. But I will say Photoshop is by far the industry standard, so you won't be disappointed. If you can learn that software, you're going to go far. Right here, I just wanted to show you kind of the save menu. So you can see here's that Photoshop PSD file. So as soon as you get that in there, like the square clear gloss I was working with is a JPEG, so I saved that as a Photoshop. So next, let's talk about the resolution. Again, I know we just touched on this a second ago, but I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into it. So we talked about the PPI versus DPI. So since we're working on a screen, obviously, we're going to be working in PPI. Now, one of the industry standards is if you can have a strong file at a 300 PPI pixels, then you're going to be in a good spot. Now, that being said, I know there's plenty of shops out there, they can handle a 200. I believe newspapers are in the 85 range. But again, we're dealing with very high-end printers here with incredible color accuracy. So I don't want us to limit ourselves. So I'd say if you know your file is going to be, you know, in its final resting place is going to be a larger output, always start with that max file size. I always suggest we never really want to increase a file, increase the scale. We always want to decrease it because I'm sure you guys have seen it before, that pixelation. So as you stretch a file more and more and you get into it, you really start to see kind of like those nasty artifacts and stuff that we just don't want in our print. You know, we want a very crisp final print. So working with a 300 PPI is a strong recommendation, and especially at your final output size. Resizing, and we're going to go into this in Photoshop as well. Photoshop has a couple great features in there when it comes to image size. They've got a bicubic smoother. They've got all kinds of different ways that we can enlarge and reduce file types. Now, again, like I said, I don't recommend increasing if you can avoid it, because what's going to happen in that situation, Photoshop's going to have to kind of create its own pixels, if that makes sense. So it's saying, hey, you know, I see there's no information here, then you're trying to size me up. So let me just fill in whatever I think might work. And I'll tell you, you know, that doesn't always work out as sweet as we might like. So I would suggest if you can, start with that utmost file size and always decrease from there. So here's that window I was talking about with the resizing. So you can see on our image size here, I'm working with a 4" by 4". I have my resolution set to 300 pixels per inch. So I'll tell you right now, if I was just transferring this to like a coaster, as I was, just a coaster, it's going to be spot on. You know, we're going to have the super color accuracy, and I know it might be hard to see through the screen here, but you know, with this preview window, you can see how crisp the image is going to remain. Now, if I end up resampling that, you know, most of the time automatic will be a safe place. Photoshop is pretty smart in that regard, but this drop-down menu does offer you a few options. So I always encourage you guys, since this is a preview window, just check a couple of the samples out, see what fits best in your eye. And usually, I mean, you know, again, at the end of the day, you know, what's good to our eye is going to be the final be-all, end-all there. But this is a good tool to start with for your resizing so that we don't degrade the image any more than we have to. And again, we have these links down here. So if you want to do a deeper dive, we always suggest, you know, click on these links, check a couple of the Adobe help signs, and kind of, you know, it's a helpful utility. So last, I did throw this Epson print layout in here. I do just want to say that for a a free tool to kind of get you really going off the ground. It's a fantastic, I kind of call it a glorified print driver. It's a very strong tool to get your settings. Now, it does have some template options, but if we're doing more of the intense editing when it comes to maybe saturation or selective colors, or if we're working with curves or levels, that's going to stick with our Photoshop. But I do suggest people to check out this Epson print layout, especially if you're working with some of these P series and you just want the easiest setup. You have your file created in Photoshop and then you just bring it right in there and it's good to go. So we can always talk about that more later if you have questions on it. Let's also talk about the transform. So I want to bring this up because, especially in the sublimation world, we're going to be doing probably quite a bit of resizing, manipulating the image, rotations, all that good stuff there too. So under the edit page, under the edit tab, excuse me, in Photoshop, if we go towards the middle section there, we have a couple options. There's free transform and transform. So under transform, it kind of gives us a few options for skew. I like to use free transform. Just a great shortcut to know is that Control T. So every time you click that, that's going to give us the ability to resize it, scale it, twist it, whatever we need to do. So again, a lot of this is going to be for matching up to our templates. Let's say I'm using a an ornament, which I'll show you here shortly. An ornament has kind of an interesting cutout pattern. So we want to make sure that when let's say we're placing a picture of a family on there, we're not cutting off any heads, removing any arms or anything like that. So we can have everything pre-set up in Photoshop. And then what I'll do is I like to nest mine, which we'll go over that as well. And basically what nesting is if I have multiple graphics I'm working with, I will put those all into one file. That way I can print those all without any paper waste there as well. So I know I keep talking about Photoshop, but I do want to kind of give you guys a few options out there. Again, Photoshop, as I'm sure all of you know, is by far the industry standard. And here's what I tell people with Photoshop is I know when you open it for that very first time, you have a little mild heart skip there. But to be honest with you, it's a piece of software that you can either work with just the basics, or you can do a complete deep dive. And I mean, you can go into the color proofing world, and we'll dive into all that stuff in a later video here. But I do just want to encourage you guys, if you can, Photoshop is going to be one of those pieces of software that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. So if you can start getting into it now, I can promise you, you're going to save yourself tons of headaches in the future. And by the end of it, you could become, one of those Photoshop gurus that, we're watching on YouTube. So strong encouragement. And one thing I'll mention too is that there are a lot of, I'm more than happy to help you guys with any of that stuff, but there are a lot of unbelievably great resources out there for all the Adobe suites, whether it's Photoshop, Illustrator. So I do encourage you guys, if you have some time, just hop on YouTube, check out a few things, and just maybe get some ideas rolling there. But for those of you who don't want to have to worry about that monthly fee, which I totally understand, I do give you a few options here to choose from. Canva is a popular one now that Epson's kind of working with. So we're going to have a few kind of cool things on that side of things later. But again, I just want to throw these at you. Affinity is one. GIMP is a popular one that's kind of like a Photoshop. Pixlr is kind of like a browser-based solution, so you can do that through your internet. And then the Epson print layout. So like I said before, Epson print layout is great for that final print. So if you have something that's already 95% of the way there, and you just need to get that last little bit taken care of, Epson print layout can be a great tool for you as well. All right, enough on that side. So let's actually get into the nitty-gritty of the software itself. So here is probably what I would say is one of the most important, if not the most important things. It's starting strong, which is kind of what I say here. So this is really our file prep. And again, I know I'm focusing on Photoshop, but this will translate through all raster processors there. So with this, technically, so I know what I'm going to work on today is a 14 by 16 print. Let's say for this instance, I'm doing a t-shirt. I'm using our F2100 to do 100% cotton. Black t-shirt. So since I know my platen size is 14 by 16, I know I cannot exceed that. So to me, I will always start with that max size. That way, if I do need to reduce this to a pocket print, or if I do need to reduce it to something smaller, I'm only going to have to size down and never have to scale up and lose any of that resolution that I'm working with here. As you can see, I'm working with the 300 ppi, which again, I encourage if you can. If you do need to save some resources, you can drop that down a little bit lower and get away with it. But I just like to put this out there because it kind of is that golden standard, if you will. So here's actually a kind of a hot topic, if you will. And I don't want to spend too much time on color modes. We're going to dive into that next week. But my strong encouragement is to work in the RGB color mode. And I'll tell you why. Even though we're technically sending this to a CMYK printer, dealing with these P series, don't forget that we have 12 colors. We're talking 99% Pantone match. So I don't want you guys to limit yourself in the editing process. If you have to at the end, we can convert that to CMYK. But remember, a lot of these, especially again on the P series side, we're dealing with 10 plus colors. So we do have a larger range than what you might see here. And also, if you're working with any kind of RIP softwares like a Onyx or a Wasatch, it's going to do that conversion for you. So we're going to take those values and make sure that they work perfectly with that program there. So, and one last thing here too on the color mode, you see I'm working in 16-bit. Hopefully you can see that there. A lot of people will ask about 8-bit versus 16-bit. It's a controversial thing a little bit, but for the most part, the rule of thumb is, when you go to print, 8-bit will be more than fine. However, when we're doing our editing and actually working in this program, I strongly recommend working in 16-bit because it's going to make our processing better. So certain plugins are going to take advantage of that. We're going to be able to stretch some of that information a bit further, have more information within that. So at the end of the day, if we need to, we can always bounce that out and export that as an 8-bit file. But when you're working, I always recommend having the strongest possible file to work with. So I say 16-bit is a good spot. For my background contents here, you can use white, or I use transparent just because for majority of things I'm going to be working with, especially if it's sublimation or DTG, I'm going to need that transparency. I don't want that big white bounding box around there. Now, in the sublimation world, white is going to translate into transparent, but in my opinion, I'd probably keep it transparent anyway. That way, if I do end up moving it into another device, like I say, sublimation into a direct-to-garment printer, then I'm already covered on that side. One other thing here, and if you can't see this section, make sure you have your advanced options clicked, this little drop-down menu. I recommend working in the Adobe RGB color profile. It's probably the most universal and kind of the standard now, if you will. And pretty much any program out there is going to be able to work with those profiles. So that's going to keep it fairly consistent across the board for everybody. And then last but not least is pixel aspect ratio. We're going to leave that in square pixels. They have a few options for video, but most of us, we're dealing with print here. So we're going to leave that in the square pixel side of things. So, I'm going to skip the middle section. So let's assume we finish all of our edits. We're liking what we're seeing. So this is going to be when we do the file print option inside of Photoshop. So a few things here to note. Obviously, we want to make sure we have our printer set properly. If we do need to make multiple copies, we can do that. You can see my document profile here. So it knows that the color space I was working in was in the Adobe RGB. We have two options here. So in this one, just to kind of keep everything simple, I kept the color handling to the printer. So what I said is, hey, take these values, the printer from here, the driver will handle any colors I need to. If you need to, and I do this quite often, is I will let the Photoshop manage the profile. So what I'll do is if I let Photoshop manage colors under that printer profile, I have the options. You can see right here, I might have the archival matte paper, or if I have maybe some metallic luster in there, I can change that. And Photoshop's going to do basically the heavy lifting when it comes to color. Rendering intent and normal printing, for the majority of things we'll be dealing with normal printing. The other side would be proofing. But like I said, I don't want to dive too deep into the color just yet. We're going to save that for another one here. And then rendering intent, just for safety's sake, perceptual is probably majority of where you're safe at. What perceptual is going to be is closer to what you see on the screen. What you see is what you get. There are a few things with the absolute and relative color metric where if we need to start bringing things into gamut that are maybe out of gamut, we can deal with that. But like I said, we'll save that for a little bit later. So now I want to actually jump into Photoshop in action here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up a quick video for you. And this will be a little bit more of a deep dive into the settings. So let's start with this one here. This is Photoshop print settings.
Another quick tip from Imaging Spectrum. Today, we will focus on printing preferences and settings within Photoshop for properly sized and color profiled images. Open Photoshop and set your sizing. With sizing set, add your image. Today, we are printing to an F570, the latest 24-inch dye sublimation printer from Epson using a 24-inch roll, which is what I have my width set to. Once your images are added and positioned where you like, check your maximum required height. In our case, 4 inches. Next, select Print under the File drop-down menu and check that you have the proper printer selected. For this print, we will let the printer manage colors. Now click Print Settings within the Photoshop print window, and it will bring up your printing properties. Select Custom Paper Size to change your final output to either millimeters or inches. For today's image, I have adjusted the width to 24 inches wide and the height to 5, since it's the shortest height allowed and we only need 4 inches to fit our graphic. From here, we can also change color profiles, quality settings, and our print preview pop-up. You will notice after you leave this menu and come back to Photoshop, your image should adjust to be closer to the appropriate output size. If need be, you can adjust the image placement by dragging the image around as well. Next, select Print. The print preview window will then pop up, allowing us to view our final output before committing. Notice that our image has been mirrored since we are sublimating. Check your settings on the right, and then hit Print. This should get you the appropriate sizes for a great print next time you need something a little more custom. And of course, if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Talk to you soon.
All right. So hopefully, really what I was trying to iterate there is focus on the printer driver. So even though we might have everything set and you're still potentially seeing something that might be a little out of whack there, a lot of times we need to make sure under those print settings we have our driver settings at the appropriate output, color profile, and quality settings as well. So one last thing I want to show you guys, since we are talking about Photoshop today, this is more of just like a really quick way to use templates here. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you. So what we're going to do here with this is I have a PDF template I brought in from Chromalex. This is one of their ornaments. So I'm going to bring in a JPEG that I want to use with it today. So as you can see, two things here. I've got my white bounding box. So I'm going to drag this in here. I'm going to remove the excess white. And how I'm going to do that is use my eraser tool, which is the E button. Or if you click and hold it, I can grab this magic eraser. From here, what I'm going to do is just do a basic prep. Again, like we were talking about before with a transform, I like to do my free transform, so I have a little bit more. So I can just kind of size that and get it where I needed to. Now, if you can see over here in my layers panel, I actually have a mask layer here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say create clipping mask. And what that's going to do is reference that layer there and allow me to size this exactly as needed. So that way I can see a full visual representation of how my final product is going to look before I actually send that to the printer there. From there, we could just send it right back, and I could add that to my, my nesting product, hit print, and then I know exactly what that final output is going to look like. So I know that was a super quick crash course, but I don't want to dive too deep into just going through the software just yet. I just wanted to kind of give this as a brief overview of some basics to start to work with there. So I think with that being said, I do want to open it up for some questions if you guys have anything that's popping up or anything you feel like that you would like me to dive a little bit deeper into. So feel free if you guys can either use the chat or you can use the Q&A option, and we'll answer those in real time here. Nothing so far. I'm going to take that as a good sign, actually. Anything else that you guys want to bring up? Or
So, Zach,
yes, sir.
you talked about these files, and say someone has a file for that they have, and you know, we saw the imaging spectrum file, but they have their own file that they want printed for sublimation or just you know, on the P series printer,
Sure.
like the new 9570, 7570. Do you offer some type of sample prints?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, so guys, and here's a couple things that we like to do. And we're definitely fortunate here to have the latest and greatest equipment from Epson. So if you guys have questions on that, or if you really just need us to sit down and maybe show you kind of one-on-one, we're more than happy to do that as well. But if you would like to see what an actual, like a quality print from your original file would look like, definitely feel free to send that our way. Give me a call. I always like to discuss kind of how the file was prepped and, you know, kind of a few things that we can maybe kind of get a little bit better. That way we can actually have the best output possible. And of course, you know, we love this stuff. So anytime you guys have questions on graphic prep or final output, definitely don't hesitate on that side of things as well. And I should mention, if, for those of you who don't know, we are an Epson Solution Center here. So we do, like I said, have all the latest and greatest. So if you ever want to come in, we definitely encourage that. I know with the way things are right now, if you want to do a FaceTime as well or just talk through email, that's more than fine. So send us a file, we'll print it for you, send it to you, get your hands on it, and we can kind of talk about, the graphic side and, of course, obviously the hardware side as well. Any questions, guys, that are popping up? Or hopefully that was like I said, I know that was a really kind of very much a general overview, but I don't want to dive in too deep just yet. I want to just kind of get the terms in everyone's heads and, maybe get some ideas rolling there. So.
And maybe kind of put this out. This is Morgan with Epson. You talked about using Adobe or Photoshop. What are some common softwares that that people are using that's on this call?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question, guys. If you have something that you're using, either throw it in the chat or the Q&A. I know we were talking to someone earlier who was using Photo Booth, but I think you were using Photoshop for your editing. Again, we are going to release all of this online. So a few of the kind of cheaper and free software options out there, we'll have links for those that you guys can check out. I know Canva, and maybe Morgan, feel free to chime in on this one. But I know I think Epson's working with Canva a little bit for a kind of a good entry level into design software. So that's kind of an exciting new thing that's coming out as well. Julie, thanks. Yes, so absolutely. Stanley, thanks. Photoshop. Yeah, and again, I mean, I think we all know here, Photoshop is the industry standard. I know sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow with that monthly fee, but unfortunately they suckered us all into it, so here we are. But I will say, Jolie, we are going to send out a PDF version of this that can be downloaded. So all those links will be something you can click on and check out. And of course, if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, we love that too. So feel free to call in.
Hey, Zach.
Hey.
This is Vincent. We're not actually sending out the presentation, but we will have a PDF that can be downloaded from our /training page.
Excellent. Thank you.
So where can they find that training page?
Great question. So we're going to actually have that under imagingspectrum.com /training. So I just want to show you guys, we are going to be doing an understanding color soon enough, but so if you want to do www.imagingspectrum.com /training at the end there, TRAINING. And all of ours, all of the webinars that we are going to be doing from the past and the future, they will be added up there as time goes on. So, if there's ever anything that you are wondering maybe about, it's always a good page to check out. We've talked about mass production, direct-to-garment printing, sublimation, solvent side of things. So a lot of good information in there for you guys. Scott asked, is Caldera able to be integrated with the new P9570? Great question, Scott. And I believe, no, actually, I'll go to that, Vincent, but the Caldera, yes, I believe, and I'll confirm that, but I know everyone's coming out with the updates now. I believe Wasatch has added, Onyx has added it, so I'd be surprised. I'll confirm that for you, though, Scott. Vincent makes a good point. I will pull that training page up just real quick here.
And just to jump in on that Caldera question, I mean, it seems like a lot of RIPs play catch up, when new printers come out. Even the P9570 and 7570 has been out for a few, I don't know, about half the year now. But yeah, that usually comes from on the RIP side. They got to get their drivers in order and get things updated so they can work with these printers. So yeah, that kind of is varies, from RIP to RIP.
I'll dive into that, Scott. Like Matt said, yeah, they're always planning on playing catch up since Epson's always on the cutting edge, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if it's not there yet. We'll see it very, very shortly. Any other questions, guys? Stanley asked, can we get printer profiles for the prep of file? Absolutely. So Stanley, if you're working with the the Epson, actually, when you download those drivers, those profiles will be embedded into Photoshop as well. I would still probably suggest working in the Adobe RGB space, and then when you go to do the final print at the end, that's when we'll either let Photoshop manage it, and we can select those profiles, like if we're using a third-party media maybe, or if you just want to let the printer manage the colors, as long as we tell the printer when we load it what media we're using. The printers, I mean, these are smart. And I will say, good question on the printer profiles. Just real quick, I want to mention on these new 7570s and 9570s, what they're doing is a medium manager. So it's a software now. So if Epson does come out with anything new, or maybe some of these other third-party companies, they'll be able to actually integrate that directly into that. So it's going to be saved on both your computer and your printer. So every time you load that media, you select on your printer, and you're pretty much good to go from there. But Stanley, if you have any questions on maybe some third-party medias, most of those companies out there will have an ICC profile for it. I will say with some of these newer printers, 95 and 75, since they are new, I know people are developing some of those profiles for their third-party media, but right now Epson has those pretty much locked down perfectly. So I've been very, very happy with the results. And one thing I'll say too on those is if you're curious, if you knew about the old standard versus commercial edition, now they said forget it. You get the best of both worlds. So you get the light black, and you also get that violet in there. So we have a lot of wiggle room. Again, I mean the 99% Pantone match is just unbelievable from that P series there. Here. Don asked a great question. Don says, I'm converting to the PC side using Corel Paint Shop Pro. He has an Epson 3800. Oh, and there was customized profiles back then for the 3800. So he's asking, how do I create my own profiles for PC? So Don, we're definitely diving into a whole separate topic here, but I love where your head's at. So there's a few options out there. In my personal opinion, X-Rite is kind of the leader of the pack there. So what we can actually do, it's a little involved, bringing up a print chart, printing these colors out, taking a spectrophotometer, making sure everything matches up appropriately. I will say one thing, Don, and for anyone else out there who's curious, that if you're dealing with some of these P-series hypercritical color, you can actually add a spectrophotometer built into it. I know Matt just did an install recently for one. And what were they doing over there, Matt? Was that proofing, the proofing side of things?
Yeah, large advertising agency where colors were critical, when they're going to pre-press all of their stuff. And so, yeah, that's where the spectral prover came in play there, along with, they had an EFI, fiery rip to go along with it. So situations like that where really if you're matching Pantone colors and trying to get your measurements right, as far as your proofing paper goes, ICC profiles, trying to get it maybe Grackle certified, then that's where it really comes in play.
Absolutely. So yeah, so Don, great question. And again, we're dealing with a couple different pieces of software here. X-Rite has their i1 Pro 2. They've got a published software, so especially if you're dealing with things with spot colors in it, it does end up being a little bit more involved, but absolutely something that can be done. A lot of these people are using RIP softwares as well. So, with some of these RIP softwares, you can integrate these spectrophotometers directly to it. So it's actually going to basically auto-calibrate for you as it's coming out of that printer and kind of setting everything properly. Anything else, guys? All right, well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming through. Hopefully, that was easy to digest and understandable. I always encourage, if you guys really want to dive deeper, I mean, you can always call us, we can talk about it. And like I said before, I'll reiterate, next week we are going to have the Graphics Matter 2, where we're going to focus on a lot more of the color management side. And we'll definitely be touching on those profiles as well, Don. So if you can make it, definitely going to look forward to you there. If not, of course, we will put these up online as time goes. All right, guys, I'm going to open it up one last time for any questions. If not, then I think we're going to close this down. I do want to say thanks everyone for attending. It's always appreciated. It's fun to have somebody to kind of go back and forth with. So I really do appreciate you guys participating here. And I think it helps everyone kind of get on the same page too. So If you guys ever have any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out, 214-342-9290. So awesome, guys. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and definitely stick around, guys. We have a lot of more exciting things coming here in the future, and you know, we're always building, always growing, always cool new things. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Zach.